Let's put aside the fantasies of becoming a billionaire for a moment. Today, I want to wrestle with a very specific number. That number is not $1 million. It is not 10 million. That number is 20,000. If you mention this number to people on Wall Street, they might laugh at you because that might just be the cost of the wine at their dinner. But if you ask me or if you ask Charlie Munger, we will tell you this $20,000 is the most important, the most difficult, and the most decisive sum of money in your entire life. Why 20,000? Why not 10,000 or 50,000? Because at the intersection of physics and finance, there is a concept known as escape velocity. Imagine a rocket trying to fly into space. In the first few minutes of ignition, it burns more fuel than during the rest of the entire journey combined. Why? Because in that phase, it must fight against the strongest gravitational pull of the Earth and the thickest atmospheric resistance. For most people, the zone between 0 and $20,000 is your gravity well. In this zone, you are not moving forward, you are fighting for your life. We have to be honest about this. When the number in your bank account is below 20,000, your life is actually in a state of extreme fragility. Nassim Cobb talks about anti-fragility. But at this stage, you are completely fragile. Let me paint a picture of this life for you. I know this life because before I became the so-called Oracle of Omaha, I observed countless people struggling at the bottom. When you only have $100,000 in savings, every small accident in life is a catastrophe. Your car breaks down and the repair bill is $500. This isn't just an expense. This means you might not be able to pay rent this month, or you might have to turn to a payday lender. And once you take that high interest loan, you are sucked into a vicious cycle. You have a toothache, but because you can't afford the dentist, you choose to endure it. As a result, a year later, a small problem turns into a major surgery, and the cost goes from a few hundred to a few thousand. You see, this is what I call the gravity of poverty. When you have no money, the cost of surviving in this world is actually higher. Banks charge you maintenance fees because your balance is too low. Landlords charge you penalties because your rent is late. You buy cheap shoes every year because you can't afford high-quality ones that last. This gravity pins you firmly to the ground. That is why I say the first $20,000 is the hardest. It's like walking through quicksand. Every time you pull one foot out, the other sinks deeper. Charlie Mayer has a famous quote, "The first 100,000 is a bitch." But that was by the standards of decades ago. In today's economic environment, for an ordinary working class person, I believe the true psychological threshold is 20,000. Until you save this 20,000, no so-called investment strategy can actually help you. Don't think about stock dividends. Don't think about compound interest curves, because when your principal is nearly zero, a 100% return is still zero. At this stage, the money you earn from investing wouldn't even be enough to buy a hamburger. This is a dark tunnel. Many young people walk in this tunnel for years only to find themselves still running in place. So they despair. They start to believe that social mobility is dead. They start to believe that hard work is useless. And then they squander the little money they have trying to numb the pain through consumption. But this is exactly where most people fail. What this video is about is not how to make you rich, but how to make you take off. We are going to talk about how to generate enough thrust to break out of this gravity. Well, because once, and I mean once, you cross this 20,000 line, a miracle happens. The air gets thinner, the resistance drops, the gravity weakens. Suddenly, every bit of effort you put in before it starts to return to you exponentially. But before we get there, you must recognize where you are right now. If your current savings are below this number, please turn off all distractions and put your phone on silent, because the next 50 minutes might be the most important physics lesson of your life. We are on the launch pad right now. The countdown begins. Now, let's assume you have climbed out of that gravity well. You have 20,000 sitting in your bank account. You haven't bought a Ferrari. You haven't moved into a mansion. And you look exactly the same as you did yesterday. But I can guarantee you, deep inside your brain, the chemistry has changed. This chapter is about the psychological shift. I call this change the birth of refusal power. Do you know why most people live like slaves in the workplace? It is not because they lack ability. It is because they lack the capital to say no. Let's run a comparative experiment. Imagine two young people sitting in the same office. Let's call them Jack and Mike. Their salaries are exactly the same and their skills are equal. The only difference is that Jack has zero savings, or perhaps even $30,000 in credit card debt, while Mike has $20,000 in cash. Now the boss walks into the office and makes an unreasonable demand. Maybe he asks them to work overtime on the weekend for free. Or maybe he asks them to sell a product that is clearly defective. What will Jack do? Jack's heart rate will accelerate and his cortisol levels will spike. His brain will instantly go into survival mode. He will think, if I refuse, the boss might fire me. If I lose my job, how will I pay rent next week? What about my car payment? Fear instantly hijacks his rationality. So even though Jack is completely unwilling inside, he will lower his head and submissively say, yes, boss, no problem. In that moment, Jack is not an independent individual. He is a person forced to sell his dignity because of financial fragility. Now look at Mike. Mike has $20,000. This money is enough for him to live for 6 months to a year without any income. When the boss makes the same demand, there are no sirens going off in Mike's brain. He will calmly evaluate the request. He can look the boss in the eye and calmly say, I don't think that was a good idea. Can we find another way? Or if the request truly crosses the line, he can even tell himself, even if I quit right now, I will be fine. You see, this is called refusal power. Mike did actually quit, but because he possesses the ability to walk away at any time, he holds the initiative at the negotiation table. This is what I always say. If you cannot walk away, you cannot negotiate. That $28,000 is essentially not money. It is body armor for your personality. Psychologists have long confirmed a brutal truth. Poverty lowers your IQ. There's a book called Scarcity, and the research in it shows that when a person worries about money all day, their cognitive bandwidth gets severely occupied. This constant anxiety is equivalent to a temporary drop in IQ of 13 to 14 points. That is worse than going a whole night without sleep. This explains why poor people often make a series of bad decisions. Why do you buy lottery tickets? Why do you take out payday loans? Why do you spend 2 hours waiting in line to save 2? It is not because you are stupid. It is because your brain is filled with the fear of survival and you simply have no space left to make long-term plans. When you possess $20,000, the most magical thing happens. Your cognitive bandwidth is released. You no longer need to worry about next week's grocery bill. So your brain starts to switch from survival mode to strategy mode. You begin to see things 3 months or even 3 years down the line. You will find that you become smarter at work, more confident in social interactions, and even your temper improves. This is not because you read some self-help book, but because you turned off that survival alarm that has been screaming in your head. Many people ask me, Warren, what is true wealth? True wealth is not how many yachts you can buy. It is waking up in the morning and being able to say, I can do whatever I want today. That $20,000 is the admission ticket to this kind of freedom. Although it cannot buy a yacht yet, it has bought back the most expensive luxury in the world, your rationality and your dignity. So at this stage, even if your shoes have holes in them, even if you are driving a 15-year-old beat-up car, as long as you have that $20,000 in your account psychologically, you are already far wealthier than those driving BMWs, but carrying massive car loans. You are no longer walking on a tight rope. You finally have a safety net beneath your feet. And only when you are not afraid of falling can you start attempting difficult maneuvers, such as thinking about how to get richer. Welcome to chapter 3. If I didn't talk a little bit about math, I wouldn't be Warren Buffett. But I promise you, today's math class will not be boring because it relates directly to when you can retire. In the last chapter, we talked about the psychological shift. Now we need to talk about the mathematical shift. The theme of this chapter is the official start of the compound interest machine. Einstein called compound interest the 8th wonder of the world. But most people fail to understand a prerequisite for compound interest. Compounding requires critical mass, just like a nuclear reactor. If you don't have enough uranium, the reaction simply won't happen. In the world of wealth, the $20,000 Is that critical mass? Let's do a brutal comparative calculation. Assume you are a very smart investor, you are a genius in the stock market, and you can earn a 10% return a year. This is already extraordinary because most professional fund managers cannot achieve this. If you only have 100,000 in your hand, you worked hard researching for a whole year. Read countless financial reports, beat the market, and earn 10%. What is the result? 100. What can 100 do? Maybe you can take your partner out for a nice dinner or fill your gas tank twice, and then that 100 is gone, and it makes no structural change to your quality of life. You still have to worry about next month's rent. Your investment return is swallowed up by the noise of life. This is why it is hard for the poor to get rich through investing, because when the base is too small, the snowball of compounding simply cannot get rolling. Let's see what happens when you possess 20,000, the same 10% return. 10% of a 20,000 is 20,000. What does 20,000 mean? For many ordinary families, this could be a whole month's salary or 2 full months of rent. This is not just a difference in numbers. This is a difference in nature. When your investment income can cover a major expense in your life, like automatically paying your rent or automatically paying your car loan, magic happens. You suddenly discover that you are no longer fighting alone. You have gained an invisible partner. This partner doesn't eat, doesn't drink, doesn't sleep, and has no emotions. But every year, he faithfully earns back a month of freedom for you. I have a famous analogy. Life is like a snowball. The important thing is finding wet snow and a really long hill. That 20,000 is the first tight snowball core you have packed together. If you don't have this core, no matter how much snow you scatter on the hill, it will just be blown away by the wind. It will never gather together. Let's look at how this core rolls over the river of time. We will use a simple mathematical tool called the rule of 7. Divide 72 by your annual rate of return. And that is the time it takes for your assets to double. If you put this 20,000 into a standard index fund, assuming an annual return of 7 to 10%, this means every 7 to 10 years your money automatically doubles. 20,000 becomes 40,000, 40,000 becomes 80,000, 80 becomes 160, 160 becomes 320, 320 becomes 6040. Please note during this process, you don't even need to deposit a single extra penny as long as you don't touch it. As long as you let it roll down that long hill. By the time you retire, this initially insignificant 20,000 will turn into a huge sum. This is why I say before you save 20,000, do not care about the rate of return. Many young people only have a few thousand, yet they are obsessed with options, cryptocurrencies, or those junk stocks that claim to multiply 10 times. Why? Because they feel their principal is too small. So a 10% return is meaningless. They want a 500% return. This is suicidal mathematical logic precisely because you look down on that 10%. You took the risk of a 100% loss, and as a result, your principal went to zero. You have to go back to the starting line and start carrying bricks all over again. Mark my words. Before 20,000, your primary task is defense. It is accumulation. It is squirreling away every acorn like a squirrel. At this stage, the importance of principal far outweighs the rate of return. You must pack this first pile of wet snow tight through selling your labor and time and through an extremely frugal lifestyle. This is a purely physical process. There are no tricks to it. But once you have packed this snowball and placed it on the hill, the rules of gravity change before gravity was hindering you from climbing up. Now gravity starts helping you roll down. This is the turning point from being human-driven to capital-driven. Before this line, you work for money. After this line, money starts working for you. Although it is just an intern at first and doesn't earn much, it grows much faster than you can imagine. Now we arrive at the most dangerous and darkest chapter of this video. If the previous chapters were about how to climb out of the deep, well, this chapter is about how not to fall back in. I call this chapter the Great Filter. In the Fermi paradox, the great filter refers to a threshold in the evolutionary process that is extremely difficult to cross. The vast majority of life forms go extinct before this threshold. In the process of wealth accumulation, a 20,000 is that great filter. Statistics tell us that many ordinary people actually have had 20,000s in savings at some point in their lives, maybe even more than once. But why do the vast majority end up broke? Because they fail to pass through this filter. This is a brutal psychological trap. When you have a 20,000 in your hand, the temptation you face is 10,000 times greater than when you had no money. This is what I call the reward trap. Think about it. You worked hard for 3 years eating instant noodles every day, buying no new clothes, and finally saved up 20,000. At this moment, your brain generates a strong psychology of compensation. It tells you, hey, you have worked so hard, you are a rich person, now you should reward yourself. Coincidentally, at this very moment, your 10-year-old Toyota breaks down again. You walk past a car dealership and see a brand new shiny SUV. The down payment is exactly 20,000. The devil in your heart says, buy it. I have money. I can afford it. This is the moment the filter activates. Most people fall right here. They sign the check and drive that new car home. In that moment, they feel incredibly proud. They feel like they have succeeded. But what I see is a different scene. I see a person who has personally killed the golden goose that just hatched. That car you bought is not an asset. It is a liability. The second you drive it off the lot, it depreciates by 20%. Even worse, for the sake of this car, you have blown your newly established core of compound interest to smithereens. You haven't just returned to square one. You have taken on a new car loan, higher insurance premiums, and higher gas cost. The gravity well opens up again and sucks you back in. And this time, because you have tasted the pleasure of a new car, you can no longer endure the hardship of frugality. You may never get another chance to climb out in this lifetime. Aside from your own desires, there is an external force trying to pull you down. Sociologists call this the crab bucket effect. If you put one crab in a bucket, it can crawl out. But if you put a group of crabs in a bucket, whenever one tries to crawl out, the crabs underneath will grab it with their claws and drag it back down. When you save 20,000, when you start refusing meaningless consumption, when you start talking about investing instead of gossip, your friends, colleagues, and even relatives will feel uncomfortable. They will say, what's the use of saving money? Money is meant to be spent. They will say, look at that guy. He clearly has money, but still drives a junk car. What a miser. They mock you not because you were doing something wrong, but because your self-discipline highlights their indulgence. Subconsciously, they don't want you to pass through that filter because that means you will enter a world they cannot reach. To pass this filter, you have to become a little weird. You have to get used to loneliness. You have to learn to enjoy the thrill of watching the numbers in your bank account grow rather than the thrill of watching your closet fill up. Charlie Murr and I have lived with such misunderstandings our entire lives. We drive ordinary cars, live in old houses, and eat hamburgers. Many people think we don't know how to enjoy life. But what they don't understand is that we enjoy the sense of security. We enjoy the sound of the compound interest machine humming day and night. So when you save 20,000, this is the most critical moment. This money will feel hot in your hand. You will feel it pulsing in your pocket, begging you to spend it. You must resist this urge. You have to tell yourself, this money is not for rewarding my past. It is for purchasing my future. This is my seed. If you grind your seed into flour and eat it, you will never see a harvest in your life. This is the greatest test on the road to wealth. It is not a test of your earning ability, but a test of your sense of worthiness. Do you believe you are worthy of long-term freedom? Or are you only worthy of short-term pleasure? If you can resist buying that car, if you can resist going on that expensive vacation, if you can say no to the crabs pulling you down, then congratulations. You have just passed the great filter. Now you are officially part of the top 5%. Congratulations, you have passed the great filter. Your 20,000 is still in your account. It hasn't turned into a depreciating SUV. Now we enter the phase of tactical execution. The theme of this chapter is the specific blueprint from 20,000 to 100,000. Many people will ask me at this point, Warren, I have 20,000 now. Which magic stock should I buy? Should I chase the hottest trend that is skyrocketing? My answer is very simple, and it might seem boring to you. If you try to use this 20,000 to gamble on the next moonshot, you have basically already lost. At this stage, what you need to do is not gamble, but position yourself We need to carve up this precious seed capital. We need to divide it into two parts, the bulletproof vest and the soldiers. First, you need to take a 5 to 10,000 and put it into a high yield savings account or buy the safest government bonds. This money is your bulletproof vest. This money is absolutely untouchable. It is not for investing. It is for buying a good night's sleep. You should treat it as your private insurance company. When your car breaks down, when you get sick, or when you suddenly lose your job, this money will rush to the front lines and block the bullets of life. Only when you have this layer of body armor do you dare to hold on for the long term on the investment battlefield. Many people lose money in the market not because the market is bad, but because they didn't have a bulletproof vest. When the market crashed by 30%, they happened to need cash urgently. So they were forced to cut their flesh and exit at the lowest point. That is the stupidest way to die. So the first 10,000 must be in cash equivalents. The remaining 10 to 15,000 are your soldiers. For the vast majority of ordinary people who possess no insider information and no professional analytical skills, I have only one piece of advice. Do not try to find the needle in the haystack. You should buy the entire haystack. Look for those low-cost index funds that track the entire broad market. Send your soldiers out and let them occupy the economic territory of the entire country. You don't need to study candlestick charts, and you don't need to listen to rumors. You just need to let them stay there and harvest the dividends of the entire economy's growth for you. As long as humanity is progressing and as long as businesses are creating profits, this portion of your assets will slowly inflate over time. However, this is not enough. Simply relying on this 10-something thousand to snowball in the market while it will make you rich is too slow. You need a turbocharger. This brings me to the second point, the utilization of asymmetric risk. When you are broke, you cannot afford any risk. But when you have $20,000 as a cushion, you are qualified to play a game called asymmetric risk. What is asymmetric risk? It means your downside loss is limited, but your upside gain is infinite. The best example is investing in yourself. Take 1,000 not to gamble in the market, but to buy a course, earn a certificate, or learn a new skill. If you can't learn it, you lose merely $1,000 in some time. This is a limited loss. But if you learn this skill, might increase your monthly salary by $500. That is $60,000 a year and $60,000 in 10 years. You see, invest $1,000, return $60,000. In the financial market, no legal investment can offer this rate of return, but in the investment of human capital, it is the norm. What did that $20,000 give you? It gave you a buffer period where you won't starve. Even if you fail, you can use this time to try a side hustle, to do trial and error, and to find a second income curve. This is the fundamental difference between the poor and the middle class. The poor, lacking a buffer, can only sell cheap labor day after day, whereas you have a buffer and you can spend money to purchase future earning power. At this stage, your goal is to sprint to $100,000 as fast as possible. Charlie Munger says the first $100,000 is the hardest, but going from $20,000 to $100,000 is much easier than going from 0 to $20,000, because at this time you are driven by dual engines. One is the compound interest engine in the market, which is small but turning. The other is the active income engine brought by your self-investment. Finally, I want to give a stern warning to people at this stage. This is my death list on this road from 20,000 to 100,000. There are 3 pits that will instantly bring you back to 0. First, do not use leverage. Never borrow money to invest because you have 20,000. Many institutions will be happy to lend you money. Do not listen to them. Leverage will reduce your time advantage to 0. As long as the market fluctuates a little, you will be forcibly liquidated. Second, do not touch complex derivatives. You don't understand. Anything that promises high short-term returns is usually a trap designed for you. Options, futures, high-frequency trading, those are slaughterhouses for professionals, and you enter as a lamb to be slaughtered. Third, do not buy a house at this stage. I know this sounds counterintuitive, but $20,000 is too stretched for a down payment. If you buy a house now, you will be burdened with a heavy mortgage and your cash flow will be locked dead. That refusal power you just gained, that freedom to say no, will instantly vanish. you will turn back into a slave to the bank, afraid to quit your job, afraid to take risks. Be patient. A 100,000 is the next milestone. When you reach 100,000, the roar of the compound interest machine will be too loud to ignore. By then, you are not just rolling a snowball, you are triggering an avalanche. But now before that, please put on your bulletproof vest. Deploy your soldiers and strive to increase your own value. The final chapter we are going to discuss is not about the numbers in your bank account, but about your quality of life as a human being. The theme of this chapter is redefining wealth. When you save a $20,000, you might feel disappointed because when you look in the mirror, you realize you look exactly the same. You have no luxury watch, no fancy car, and even your clothes are last year's style. But I want to tell you a secret that most people overlook. This money is paying you an invisible dividend. This dividend is called a low cortisol life. Cortisol is the stress hormone. When you have no money, when you are worried about next month's rent, your cortisol levels are chronically elevated. This hormone is slowly poisoning your body. It causes insomnia. It makes you anxious. It makes you lose your temper with your family, and it even crashes your immune system. The stress of poverty is in fact a chronic disease. But when you possess that $20,000 bulletproof vest, even though you haven't bought a single thing, your cortisol levels drop. You sleep better at night. You are more patient with your children. You argue less with your spouse about money. This invisible health dividend is worth even more than the $20,000 itself. I always say money cannot buy happiness, but money can buy away a lot of unhappiness. That first 20,000 buys away exactly those nightmares that wake you up in the middle of the night. Many people think I, Warren Buffett, am happy because I possess billions in wealth. Wrong. Even if I only had a 20,000 right now, I would still be happy because $20 is enough to buy my favorite hamburgers, enough to let me live in a warm house, and most importantly, enough to let me do the work I love. This leads to the final piece of philosophical advice I want to give you. Do not let money become your master. Before 20,000, money is your master. You must obey it, doing jobs you dislike and enduring bosses you can't stand. But after 20,000, the relationship reverses. You become the master and money becomes the tool. If you save this money just so one day you can splurge like the new war reach, then you will never be truly wealthy. You are just a poor person holding some cash. If you save this money to win control over your own time, then even if you only have $20,000 in your account, you are a wealthy person. All right, this 50-minute journey is coming to an end. Let's look back at how far we have come. We started from that dark gravity well, discussing how difficult and fragile the first 20,000 is. We talked about the psychological shift and how that money gives you the refusal power to say no in this brutal world. We talked about the compound interest machine and how that core of wet snow begins to roll. We talked about the great filter and why you must resist the temptation of consumerism and not kill your golden goose. Finally, we gave you a specific blueprint on how to put on your bulletproof vest, deploy your soldiers, and conquer that first 100,000. You see, all of this, the fulcrum that can change your entire destiny, is actually just that meager 20,000. It sounds so small, but in the eyes of those who understand, it carries the weight of a mountain. If you haven't reached this number yet, don't lose heart. Ignore those showing off their wealth on social media. That is noise. Focus on your own feet. I don't want this video to be just another piece of entertainment that you enjoy watching and then forget. I want to issue a challenge. If you are serious, if you truly want to climb out of that gravity well, I want you to write down in the comments section your current status and what you are prepared to sacrifice to save this $20,000. Maybe it's I'm giving up coffee. Maybe it's I'm not buying new shoes. Maybe it's I'm starting a side hustle. Write it down. This is a contract, not with me, but with your future self. When the day comes that you actually save that $20,000, be it 3 years or 5 years from now, please come back to this video and reply to yourself, I did it. By then, you will discover that you haven't just changed your savings, you have changed the trajectory of your entire family's destiny. The game has started. Now go win your first